Okay, this is your half-life of radioactive isotopes. And there is an equation you can use, but I feel like kids find it confusing. So I'm going to explain it a little bit differently. Okay, the half-life of radium-226. Again, this is just your mass number. So the half-life is 1600 years. So what does that mean? That means every 1600 years, half of my substance decays. That's what a half-life is. So the question is, how many grams of a 0.25 gram sample will remain after 4,800 years? So we know a couple of things. We know that we're starting out with 0.25 grams, okay? And that's today, all right? So we're going to call this 0 years. All right, so what's going to happen? Well, one half-life is going to go by. So on the bottom, I'm going to add my half-life. Okay, so 1600 years have gone by, and how much of my sample is left? Half. So we're going to divide everything by 2 on the top, and we're going to add by 1600 on the bottom. Okay, so half of 0.25, so half of 25 is 12.5 grams of my substance will remain after 1600 years. But that didn't answer the question, because we want to know how much will remain after 4800 years. So I'm going to have another half-life go by. So what happens to my sample? It gets cut in half. And what am I doing on the top? I'm going to add another 1600 years. So I've got a total of 3200 years have gone by, and how much of this sample is left? Well, if we cut this in half, half of 12 is 6, half of 5 is 2.5. So we've got 0.0625 grams of our substance left after 3,200 years. Again, does not answer the question, so I keep going until I get my question answered. So I'm going to divide by 2 and add 1600 on the bottom. So 1600 plus 3,200 is 4,800 years. And what's happened to this sample? Well, it's cut in half again. Half of that is 12.5. Okay, so after 4,800 years, how much of my sample is left? 0.0125 grams of what? This radium will be left. And that is your answer. Okay, and the reason why I like doing it this way, because it's simple, but also some of the other questions are going to ask you, what is the half-life of this sample? So say it said we started out with 0.25 grams and ended up with 0.03125 grams. After 4,800 years, what is the half-life? Well, if I fill in the top and I'm missing this piece, to figure this out, I'd say, okay, this gets cut in half once, twice, 3 times. 4,800 divided by 3 equals 1,600. So that's easy to figure out. So like on number 3, you're going to have to figure out the half-life. So you'll be missing this piece, so you'll work out the top part and then solve for this. Now on number 4 though, you're missing the original mass. But what you can do is you can solve for the bottom part. Okay, so for example here, it says on number 4 that the half-life is 3.823 days. How much is going to remain after 7.64 days? So I know where I'm starting, I know where I'm ending, and it says I've got 0.05 grams after this much time. So I know the end parts, I just need to solve for the original. So if I set it up, instead of dividing, I'm going to start here and I'll just multiply and go backwards. Okay, so on this one, for example, I don't know this piece here, but it's always 0. Always start with 0 down here at the bottom. Okay, so we got 0. I don't know this piece, but what do I know? I know the half-life. If I add another 3.823. What do I end up with? 7.646, right? Days. And it says, what's the original mass if 0.05 grams remains after this many days? So this is telling me this is my end point. So now I need to solve. So I would multiply and go backwards to get here. Okay? So that's if I'm solving for original mass. If I'm solving for the half-life, right, I'm always going to have 0 here. It says after 42 days, a 2-gram sample of phosphorus 32 contains only 0.25 grams. So I know I've got 2 grams, and I'm going to keep splitting it in half until I get to 0.25. Okay? So that means out at the end, I've got 0.25 after 42 days. Alright, so keep cutting it in half, and then you figure out how many times did you cut it in half, and then you're going to divide that. So if I cut it in half 5 times, I would do 42 divided by 5, and that would go there. Okay, if you have any questions about that, let me know.